Welcome to Level Up Academy, the podcast that's dedicated to the higher education community that brings you countless stories of employees, students, and faculty's journey in this remote world we live in. We are expanding our podcast to business leaders and community experts who are sharing their story and adversity that each one of us experience to inspire and inform our world. This is your host, Dr. Leland, a serial educator, an opportunities designer, and a compassionate leader. Hello, Level Up listeners. I just wanted to let you know before we have Dohn talk about how we can save money, most of our money, hard-earned income, and not give Uncle Sam most of that money. And we're going to talk about a non-grantor, irrevocable, complex, discretionary spindrift trust. I know it's a mouthful, right? But it is a type of trust that is set up to protect the assets of the trust from the creditors of the beneficiaries. Caveat, okay, we're going to put it out there that you need to consult your own lawyer and to make sure that because this is a complex type of trust, you need an experience, and I mean an experienced lawyer to actually deal with it, okay? Definition of a non-grantor refers to the fact that the person who creates the trust, the grantor, does not retain any control over the assets or income of the trust. So therefore, you cannot access the trust assets or income for their own benefit. Irrevocable just means that the trust cannot be modified or terminated by the grantor once it has been created. Complex definition refers to the fact that the trust may have multiple layers of beneficiaries and the trust may have complex rules and provisions for how the assets and income of the trust that will be distributed. Discretionary just means that the trustee, who is the person in charge of managing the trust, has discretion over how the trust assets and income will be distributed to the beneficiary. This can be used to protect the assets of the trust from the creditors of the beneficiaries. And then lastly, we're talking about spindrift. It refers to the fact that the trust can be set up in such a way that the beneficiaries cannot access the trust assets or income until a certain age, or until certain conditions are met, which can also protect the assets of the trust from the creditors of the beneficiary. This type of trust is a very useful tool for protecting your assets for beneficiaries who may be facing either financial difficulties or those with high levels of debt or who are subject to lawsuits, right? However, it can also be complex and difficult to administer. That is the reason why it's important for you to consult an experienced attorney and tax professional to ensure that the trust is set up and administered properly. So I want to give you a heads up when Dohn is talking about the conversation today. All right. So keep that in mind. I will post something in my blog, Lua, L-U-A, by docleland.com. There's a whole bunch in the blog post in there. I'll set up something or write something about the setup of a non-grantor irrevocable complex discretionary spindrift trust. Kind of like a step-by-step, a simple type of setting that you can actually look at. But again, at the end of the day, you need a tax professional and an experienced attorney as a caveat, okay? And here is Dohn Thornton's conversation and podcast. Hello, Level Up listeners. This is your host, Dr. Leland. Today, I have a guest who has very interesting background. And for all my entrepreneurs, listeners out there, this one is for you. Dohn, introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Dohn Thornton. I am almost 59 years old. I am a veteran of 20 plus years of doing business in Russia and then doing real estate investing business in the United States, mostly in Florida. And now I basically am on a mission to educate people on how they can legally reduce their taxes to almost zero.
That's so fascinating. Let's go back 20 years of your life, right? And it's kind of summarize like where you started 20 years ago until now today, where you're at.
I would say that, to get a better picture, maybe start a little bit earlier than that.
Sure.
Because I was always fascinated with Russian language and the Russian culture. I can remember being 8 years old that I felt like that I needed to learn Russian. I had no idea why. No idea why. But I was fortunate to be in the area of St. Louis, where there was a lot of Soviet immigrants back in the 1970s, and so they offered Russian as an elective in junior high. So I took 3 years of that. I loved it, and I knew that I had to get there. There was just something inside me that says I have to learn Russian. And so as I went through high school and then my first year of college, and I realized that I wanted to go to Russia, and I was actually went to Finland as an exchange situation. And I thought, well, that's cool because Finland's right on the border, but it was still the Soviet Union. There wasn't much there. So, but I learned that I loved being outside of the country, loved learning languages. Finnish was the first language I was able to speak fluently, which is one of the hardest languages in the world. So that was a good way to get the hard part out of the way first. But I went back. I was in like 23. I was going back to being a major in Russian studies, the Russian language, and my whole career path was going to be State Department. I wanted to be a Slavic language expert. I wanted to focus on the Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia, Poland, all these Slavic languages. But I needed to get fluent, and this was still the Cold War. There was no way to get there. But I found that the State Department was recruiting Russian majors to go to Russia, to the embassy, to work for 2-year contracts. And so I said, I'm there, so I said, I'm going to go there. So I got hired as a janitor, and I literally would go out on the streets of Moscow in my broken Russian and just say, please talk to me, please talk to me. And it went from, oh, you're cool, I'm talking American, to be, you're a spy, get away from me. It was really interesting. But how I learned I got my fluency was because my father was an alcoholic, and I had gone to Al-Anon meetings and adult children of alcoholics earlier in the United States, and they had just started doing AA and Al-Anon in Moscow. And so I heard about it through the grapevine. I started going to the meetings, and honestly, that's where I learned Russian.
Oh, wow.
So I can talk to you till the cows come home in Russian about alcoholism. That's the vocabulary I got.
Wow.
So, but I got fluent, and then everything changed. I started my contract when it was the Soviet Union. By the time I left, the Soviet Union was gone. The coup happened, and then everything opened up. If you were an American and you had a passport and you spoke fluent Russian, you could write your own ticket. So next thing you know, I'm working at a joint venture between Polaroid and the Atomic Ministry for Russia. And, they were basically using their assembly lines to start assembling Polaroid cameras. And I didn't know anything about this. I was just this Russian language nerd.
Yeah.
And then I had to learn spreadsheets and all this kind of stuff. So I ended up staying. I got married.
Wow.
And we lived a life there, and we lived a great life, and 2 kids. Well, initially just the one child. And then, but about towards the end of the 90s, the Russians started pushing all the expats out. I knew that my days were numbered. And so I said to my wife, let's go back to the States and see what I can find. So my sister was working in Orlando. We went to Orlando. I found a job with an American company, and the first thing they did was they sent me back to Russia. They were trying to expand their business, the former Soviet Union, and so I took my wife back over, and little did I know that we had conceived a child, but she was going to be born in Russia. So he ended up having 3 cerebral hemorrhages.
Oh no!
Before he was born, or right during the birth, and so we got the diagnosis that he was not going to ever be a normal child, quote unquote. He was going to be cerebral palsy at the minimum. And my wife and my mother-in-law, bless their hearts, they said that we're not going to stand for that. So they searched for whatever alternatives methods of treatment, and they found a neurologist, a professor, and he said that yes, we can try this. He said that with some medication, with a very aggressive course of acupuncture and massage, that the areas where the brain died, basically like 3 areas, and a lot of that had to do with the lower extremities and the knees. He says we can actually teach the body by sending signals from their feet and the legs to the brain. We can help create new neural pathways because the ones that normally there are gone. Wow. And if you do it now, he can still walk and so forth. So, I mean, that was just like all our plans were gone. And then we just basically just threw into this. I mean, we're holding the poor guy in our hands and, just covered in needles. The massage therapist would come over 3 times a day to do all this massage and so forth. And that was 4 years of our lives doing that. Fortunately, my company decided they weren't going to expand to Russia. They fired me. And so we had to make a decision. And I just said, I'm not going to make it in Russia. There's no money for foreigners anymore.
Yeah.
So I had to leave them. And I went to Orlando with hardly any money. I had no idea what I was going to do. But I said, I can't work as a salaried employee. There's no money in it. I have to make better money. So I have to do a business of some kind.
Yeah.
I thought I'll just do real estate. So I struggled for 2 years. I didn't see my family and my kid. Thankfully, my in-laws were able to help with the cost, but it's very expensive. Even Russia was very expensive at the time. But I was able to learn how to do short sales. I became a very successful investor. I brought them back over, and we were able to move forward there. But it's funny. I made millions of dollars in real estate doing short sales in Florida, but I didn't have any money to show for it because I had to send so much money over there for his therapy and the cost of his medical stuff. So, it's one of those deals where thank goodness I had it, but we weren't able to put get a nest egg developed or whatever. So, but he had to be there for therapy, and so we started this permanent existence where I worked here for 3 weeks. I would fly over for 12 days and come back. And that's how we did it for 18 years, I guess.
Wow.
And
that's
then
so amazing.
Yeah. And then, but, I guess the universe did not want us to rest on our laurels. Say, okay, we got over this hump. And then COVID hit.
Yeah. I
didn't see him for almost 20 years. And not only that, but the courts were closed for almost 2 years. And that was the only source of business, money that I had was basically COVID took away my family again, and it took away my livelihood. So it was just like, wow. So then I finally was able to resurrect the business a little bit. I was able to go see my family after COVID, and then the war started. And now I can't. Now we're in limbo again. We're marooned again. But and of course, my short sale business now is completely gone. It doesn't work anymore, and so now I had to figure out a new gig to be able to live and support the family. And I realized that, I had to find something else. And I realized the answer was already here. I had already used a trust with my real estate business to help me protect my assets, but most importantly, to be able to legally reduce my taxes almost to, let's say 97% or less or more in that general area. And I said, well, I can teach this. So let me try. So I just didn't, I knew how to do it. I knew the theory, the strategies and so forth, but I just got out there and got on TikTok and social media, and I started trying to get on podcasts. I started going to different, just anybody I could talk to about it. And I was just starting from scratch, at 58 years old, starting from scratch again. And luckily it resonates with people because it worked. And so now we're doing really well again. And I just talked to my wife before we recorded this podcast, and she's still saying, well, it's great, but how do you get the money to me? I said, honey, I don't know. Let's just see. But at least we got the income coming. We solved that problem again. I said, look, we've been doing this for 22 years.
We're going to keep going.
We're always going to find the solutions as long as we stay going.
You are like the epitome of like perseverance and grit and resilience and just not giving up. Thank you for that. I'm hoping whoever's listening to this, that we all have adversity. We all go through life, right? But for someone like you just keeps going. Like, by the way, how's your son doing?
Well, it's an interesting situation. He's one of the best soccer goalies in the highest amateur league in Moscow.
Wow.
He runs like a deer.
Thank God for your help with that. Yeah.
He does have some lingering emotional issues that have to do with the trauma that he had. The neurologist warned us that probably not until he's 30 will he basically be able to catch up.
Yeah.
Right now, our biggest worry is that he's not going to get pulled from a street corner and thrown into a Russian military van and taken to the front. I mean, He has a medical deferment, but right now they're grabbing anybody. So
That's true.
That's our next challenge to get through.
Yeah, on top of everything else, why not? Just put it on the truck, you know? Wow,
Yes.
there's just a lot going on in there. Well, thank you so much for sharing your life, really. And um, I'm lost for words. Like, I can't even, sometimes you're looking at your problem, you're like, oh my God, it's a problem. And then you hear someone else, I'm like, okay, I'm still better on this end. There's so much worse that could happen. And for you to keep up with what you need to do because you are a dad and you're trying to provide for your family, not knowing, not seeing them, that is hard. That is very hard.
It's been very lonely.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to be one of those people that is only going to be positive. I'm going to be very real and say, yes, this year has been one of the most difficult years of my life.
Yeah.
Because I fell into a real deep depression when the war started.
Yeah.
I thought we just got over this with COVID. Now we're good again. And then boom.
Wow.
And I spent about a month in bed. I mean, I could not, I don't know,
Hey.
I'd agree.
I don't blame you. I would be too. I'm just thinking right now, my brain, I have a little bit of migraine and I'm like, oh my God, my brain is like fight or flight, just having that conversation. It's like, wow. Well, hopefully we can help you out with your business. And let's talk about your business in terms of how you can legally lower taxes. For someone who's an entrepreneur like myself, there's a lot of gigpreneur, I call ourselves now, right? There's a gigpreneur happening.
Right.
I'm in California. There's so many rules, regulations against employers in here, right? I will refuse to hire a 1099 in California because of AB laws that they have, for Lyft and Uber drivers. It started there. So I will not hire anybody. I told my friends, I love you, but I don't love you that much to complicate my life. So I'm going to hire someone else. Maybe somewhere in Nevada, I can do that. But anywhere in California, I'm not going to do it. So how does one start even on, legally lowering their taxes? Do they need to be at C Corp? I'm an LLC.
No. Actually, the only people we cannot help are W-2 employees.
Okay.
So who can we help? Business owners of any kind.
Okay.
10 employees, ironically enough, when you said that.
Yeah.
Commissioned salespeople, realtors, mortgage brokers, things like that.
Awesome.
Anybody that is getting ordinary income that's not a salary.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now we find that 200,000 is probably the lowest you can go to get much value with this. If you're making $80,000-$90,000 with non-salary money, then you're not going to pay that much taxes anyway, right? But as you get above 200, it really starts to make a difference. Here's the challenge with ordinary income, active ordinary income, is that when you get above $165,000 a year, you're taxed at 32%. And I have spoken with so many 1099 people. A lot of IT people,
Mm-hmm.
they're telling me, Don, I'm getting killed on taxes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they don't have any write-offs. And it's just and the IRS is just taking. And it's like having a 1/3 or more partner in your business that does nothing except take, and it's like, hey, that's like my first wife in Russia.
Right? Seriously. Yeah.
But you can legally remove the IRS from your business like that. You just have to know the way to do it. And I didn't know about it myself until I was 18 years into my real estate investing business. And I was tired of writing those checks because, with no false modesty, I did really well for a lot of years. And that meant a lot of taxes that were going out. And so luckily I found out from a fellow investor who found out from somebody else. And it's kind of like this. It's not really, this strategy is not really advertised. It's more of a word of mouth type situation.
Right.
There's only a few of us out here that are actually talking about it and letting people know about this on a wider scale. So I heard about it, did my due diligence, and realized that this was the most brilliant strategy that I'd ever seen to be able not only to 100% protect your assets from any lawsuits, predatory, frivolous, anything like that, they can't get to your assets or you personally, but also to be able to save so much in taxes. And it all has to do with the trust.
Trust. Okay.
Yes. It's called a non-grantor, irrevocable, complex, discretionary spendthrift trust. That's a mouthful, and most people don't know about it. Most attorneys and accountants
I don't know about it. That's, yeah.
Not many people know about it because it's basically was the go-to tool and strategy for the ultra wealthy for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And Warren Buffett famously said once that his secretary pays more in taxes than he does. And the reason why is because his secretary is a W-2 employee,
right,
and he has a trust. And so he uses these strategies, and people think, well, okay, sure, the ultra wealthy, but they have billions and they can pay for all these expensive trusts and things like that. And it's like, you know what? It's not that way. It's actually not that way. It's so much more accessible to those of us, that do well, but maybe we're not millionaires, but we do well. Let's say 200,000 or more. This is completely accessible to us. And you just have to know about it. And as someone who was on a career path to be a professor and loved to learn and loved to teach, this is right up my alley, because there's nothing I love better than showing people how they can save more money. Because let's face it, who knows what's going to happen in our economy? Some say we're going to depression, or a recession. Some people say we're doing good. Regardless, whatever happens, we're due to have a downturn. Okay?
Yeah.
So not having to pay a third of your money out to the IRS every year, it could be the difference between survival and hunger.
Yeah.
It could be the difference between just getting by and thriving.
Right.
That's a huge chunk of your money.
Right.
So we all need to have the same tool that these ultra rich have been using almost exclusively for decades.
Now, I have a question. I'm excited about it. So let's say I have a small business. I just started it.
Yep.
But my husband is a W-2. Mm-hmm. How does that work to protect? Can I still do a trust or not possible at all?
Yes. Just your husband couldn't be involved in it. And just let me say one thing before we get too deep into this.
Sure.
I do make a legal disclaimer here that I am not a licensed
attorney or anything.
Advisor,
yeah.
Attorney or an accountant. This is for informational purposes only.
Yep.
Seek legal advice before you do any transactions, okay?
Right.
Having said that, I've lived this, and I'm just going from my experience and the clients that I've had, that I've taught, and they've been able to save a lot of money as well. For your situation, absolutely you can do that. What you'd want to do is you want to make sure you have an LLC.
I have one.
Okay? You would need to invest in this trust. You become the trustee, which means that you have all of the power in the trust. You want to make your trust a 90% partner in your LLC. So you're the managing member or partner in this scenario. So you would have 10% of it ownership, and the trust would have 90%.
Okay.
So that's how you set it up. So now your trust is set up. You've got your LLC set up to run your business. That's the income's going to come into your LLC. But there's one thing else. You want to sell your assets into the trust. Because the trust is going to give you all of the asset protection. But from a business point of view, let's say, what kind of assets do you have? Is it mostly up here in your head? Is that really what your assets are? Or do you have a physical product or services that you provide?
No, it's courses. Yeah.
Courses, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you have you're more intangible heavy on your assets. But those are monetizable. And you need to monetize those and sell them to the trust. It's almost like, you may be too young for this. You look like the Beatles were like 60 years old before you were born. So, but the Beatles, remember back in the 80s, the Beatles sold their whole library to Michael Jackson. So their songs that was an asset that they sold to him. So Michael Jackson became the owner of the Beatles songs. If they wanted to play them, Michael Jackson got the royalties, not them.
Right.
Okay. So it's the same thing for you. All of your intellectual property, your knowledge, your courses, all of that you need to monetize and sell into your trust. Okay? So now the trust owns that. Now your LLC is the instrument to generate your revenue.
Right.
But LLC cannot generate revenue without access to your assets. Right? Okay? So what you're going to do is the trust is going to lease your assets to your LLC. So now that your trust now that your LLC has access to your assets, it can now generate revenue. So you go out and you start generating revenue, money comes in, whatever expenses you have, you expense out, whatever deductions you have, you can deduct them out. So at the end of the day, let's say that you have $1 million of net income after you've expensed everything else out. That's normally where you're going to determine what your tax liability would be for that year.
Yeah.
And if you're 99 or if it's active income, that's going to be at least $32,000. If it's more than, obviously it's more than $165,000.
Mm-hmm.
So look at that, how much the IRS is going to take from that. That's a huge chunk, right?
Yep.
Well, what we're going to do here with this strategy is we're going to add 2 major additional expenses to your LLC. The first one is your LLC signed a lease agreement with the trust for the assets. Got to pay the piper. The LLC's got to pay that lease. So the IRS will allow up to 70% of your net income to be used as a lease payment.
Mm.
So we're going to take 70% of your million, which is $700,000, and we're going to move that over to the trust as a lease payment. So now we've reduced the amount of money you're going to calculate your taxes on from $1 million down to $300,000.
Yep.
Okay, that's a huge savings already. But we have one more expense. Remember, your trust is a 90% limited member or partner in your LLC.
Right.
It needs to get paid for that. So we're going to take 90% of your $300,000 that's left over after the lease payment. That's going to go over to the trust as a K-1 distribution.
Nice.
So now what you've moved $970,000 or 97% of your pre-tax net income. We've moved that over now to the trust. Okay, your LLC now only remains $30,000 that's going to be taxed. Now, I think you're probably not going to be paying too much taxes on $30,000, right?
Wow, that's amazing. Actually, my mind is blown. Okay, wow. Okay, so that's how they stay rich. Okay.
Right. So now the money's come over to the trust. So you're probably thinking, well, okay, but you got to pay taxes with the trust, right? Well, no, you don't, and this is why. A lease payment and a K-1 distribution are passive income for the trust. And when that money comes in, it stays inside what we call the corpus of the trust. This means it's not going to the beneficiaries, it's not going to you as the trustee. It's inside the trust and the trust bank account. So as trustee, you have the power in accordance with IRS code 643. There is a IRS code that specifically has to do with this type of trust. As a trustee, you can declare that passive income to be an extraordinary dividend for the trust. And according to that code in the tax law, any taxes that would have been owed on that will be deferred permanently.
Nice.
As long as that money stays inside the trust.
Wow. So how do you take money from that trust to pay yourself? You don't.
You don't. And this is how it works. Okay. Do you have any children?
Yeah, 2.
They're younger than 21.
Yes, 15 and 18 this year.
Okay. So the trust, you're gonna make them a beneficiary. So if you're the trustee of the trust, your husband will be a beneficiary, your children will be a beneficiary. That means that, let's talk about your children, number one. Any expenses to do with those children, they are trust expenses. The trust pays for them. Private schools, tutors, food, fashion, clothes, culture, wellness, health. The trust pays for all of that. Okay? So as far as your husband and yourself as trustee, the trust will pay for any and everything that has to do with the beneficiaries except for the 3 Fs: food, fashion, and fun. Okay? Now, it can pay for almost everything. You can pay for food and fashion for your minor children, but for adults, you can't. It won't pay for the food or the fashion. But and from my experience, as someone who's doing this, like say if you sell your residence into the trust as an asset, your vehicles, the trust pays for all of that, the mortgage, the insurance, utilities. Your water heater breaks, you got to call a plumber. Trust pays for all of that. You want to put a swimming pool in, trust pays for that. Vehicles, gas, oil changes, whatever, insurance, everything is paid for as a trust expense. So that way, I'd say 90% maybe of what you spend, usually with post-tax dollars, is now a trust expense. The trust pays for all that. So you really have greatly limited your need for cash. So the trust pays for most of that. So now your husband's a W-2 employee. He pays for your food, fashion, and fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That is actually amazing. Like I'm lost of words. I'm like, that is actually pretty cool. I'm like, okay. Now, is there a specific person that you need to talk to? Because some tax, I mean, if my tax guy knew about it, he would have told me about it, which he didn't.
In my experience, most attorneys and most accountants or CPAs have never heard of it. And a lot of them are negative about it because if they don't, it's the interesting thing about licensed people. If they don't know about it, they immediately get suspicious and say, I wouldn't do it if I were you. Even though you can give them all case law, you can give them, everything to show them that it's absolutely 100% legal, they'll still say, I wouldn't do it. I'll give you an example. I have a client of mine that he was going to sell his business for $7.5 million. And that he was going to pay capital gains tax on the sale of his business, which is around 24%. So he was going to pay about $1.7 million in capital gains tax. Well, he saw me on YouTube, not YouTube, sorry, I think it was TikTok, doesn't matter. Well, he saw one of my videos, so he reached out to me, and I explained how this all worked. And just like I did with you, obviously went to it more in greater detail. And his tax guy would not sign off on it. He says, and they've known that they're childhood friends.
Wow.
And even though the CPA that services trust clients talked to him and went through it and showed him exactly, he still wouldn't do it. And so my guy finally said, look, if you don't pay me the $1.7 million I'm going to have to pay for taxes, then you better get out of the way, because I'm not going to pay that kind of money if I don't have to. And he said, fine. And he left. And so he found new representation. But when he sold his business, that $1.7 million did not go to the IRS. It went to his bank account, his trust bank account.
Yeah. Is it free to open a trust?
No, there's a charge to it. I mean, and it's not cheap. I'll be honest with you. I can't give prices because
it depends on the state too.
It depends on your situation.
Yeah.
Basic. I have people that just have a basic trust. Some of them just want it for asset protection. One just want to use with an LLC, like I described. Mm-hmm. Or some are really big time investors, and they have syndications. They have multiple partnerships. I have people who have multiple businesses. And I really need to have a free strategy session to go through it, and I can tell you pretty much what it's going to cost at that point. But I will tell you this, that for people making, $200,000 or more, it will not take you more than 2 years before you get that money back, if not sooner, on the savings you're going to have with your taxes.
Yeah, because... Yeah, definitely. The only hard part is, like, my husband is the W-2 that makes a lot of money, IT guy. So that's the thing. I just started my business, but I know it's going to go somewhere.
What you could do is, and sometimes I'll do this in IT especially, is just ask if he can ask to be changed to W-2 a 1099 status.
I don't think his employer would want that. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes they'll do it because it's less money for them.
Right.
They have to pay money as well.
Right.
So if you can't, you can't. You're stuck on that. But in general, if you're 1099 or business owner, commission sales, like I said, anybody that's having active income that's not salaried, this absolutely is a solution to getting the IRS out of your pocket.
Yeah, and that's actually wonderful to know because IRS is not gonna go anywhere. They're gonna be there. You know what I mean? Like they're, and I always have like laughed at it with my friends too. And I'm like, why is there hacking in the banks and hospitals and killing people? Why not the IRS? And they're like, yeah, the IRS is like using 1960s or 1930s archaic system, so no one can ever go in that back door. It's manual everything. I was like, oh man. But that is
it's a blessing, right?
right. That's true. That's actually really great. Thank you so much. Now, if anyone actually is listening to this and would like your services, where can they find you? I know you said TikTok. Are you on LinkedIn?
I am on LinkedIn, and the biggest thing is my name is spelled Dohn, and that really is an unusual spelling for Don, right?
Right.
So Dohn Thornton, Thornton, Thornton. I mean, I'm all over social media. I have a website you can go to. It's https://financial freedom, the number 4, the number U, like Utah, .now, NOW.site. Financial freedom for you.now.site. And you can go there. You can download my ebook. And I have a webinar that I did recently that goes into more detail about how this thing works, and schedule a free strategy session with me. I'd be glad to do a Zoom or a phone call and go over what your finances are like, and I can point you the right direction. And what I would like to say is that while I am not a licensed person, I do work with a company that's licensed by the law firm that owns this trust, and if someone decides to invest in it, they're going to get it from the law firm.
Okay.
So you're getting it from the law firm that's had it and has owned it for 50 years.
Wow, that's amazing. That's good. That's good information, because sometimes people do get skeptical. You're like, how do you do that? And if you actually are going through it already as an experienced person and business person, yeah.
Yes.
But you've gone through a lot, and I thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate you so much and giving so much value to my listeners, especially those gigapreneurs out there. I appreciate you so much.
No problem. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to my podcast today. If you have any questions, email me at lua@levelupbydocleland.com. Lua, LuaBydocLeyland.com. It's open for consultations and courses will be offered soon. I will see you in my next episode. Stay connected, informed, and inspired. Until next time.